Night had a way of swallowing sound on the frontier, turning every small noise into something threatening. For Mara Ellison, the darkness felt alive, watchful, heavy, full of teeth. She moved quickly along the dusty road, her thin shoes slipping in the loose gravel, her breath coming in short, frightened bursts. She clutched her mother's old shawl around her shoulders, though it did little to hold off the cold that crept into her bones. The night air was sharp, dry, and unforgiving, much like the life she was running from. She kept glancing back over her shoulder. Each time, the road behind her remained empty, but Mara knew better than to trust calm moments. The men who had threatened her stepfather didn't give up easily. They had already ransacked the house, dragged him into the street, and demanded money he did not have. She still heard the echo of their brutality. She still remembered the way their eyes had flicked toward her, hungry, calculating. Her stepfather had cursed her before they left, blaming her for everything, though she had nothing to do with any of it. When the shouting ended and the night grew still, Mara packed what little she had and fled. Now, alone beneath the moonless sky, she felt the weight of every risk she was taking. There was nowhere safe to go and no one waiting for her. But staying in that house, in that town, had been far worse than the uncertainty of the open road. The wind howled softly through the low brush on either side of her, rustling dried leaves and making them sound like footsteps. Coyotes called to one another across the distant hills. Mara couldn't tell if they were miles away or only a stone's throw. Every time she flinched, her pulse hammered harder. As if trying to warn her, she had pushed herself far beyond what she could handle. Her legs ached. She had been walking for hours without stopping, maybe longer. The world had blurred into a long stretch of shadow and dust. More than once she considered stepping off the road and hiding somewhere until daylight, but the fear of being found by animals, by men, by anyone kept her moving. If she stopped, she knew she might never start again. As she trudged forward, the vastness of the frontier night pressed in around her. Stars shimmered faintly overhead, cold and indifferent. The silence grew thicker. Her breathing became the loudest thing in her ears. She whispered little prayers under her breath, half-formed, panicked, but sincere. She didn't ask for a miracle. She only asked to make it to dawn. Then, just as she felt her strength beginning to falter, she heard something strange, a low, rhythmic rumble. At first she froze, thinking her imagination had conjured it. But it grew louder, wheels grinding against dirt, wood creaking, hoofbeats thudding steadily. A wagon. Someone was coming. Mara's heart leapt and then twisted painfully. A wagon could mean help, or it could mean danger. Travelers on this road were unpredictable. She had heard stories of drifters robbing lone wanderers. She had heard worse stories, 2 stories that made her tighten her grip on the shawl. Until her fingers trembled, the rumble grew closer. Light flickered through the darkness, a lantern swinging from the wagon side. Mara hesitated, fear warring with desperation. If she didn't try to flag them down, she might be left alone to face the night. But if she waved, she risked inviting the wrong kind of trouble. Her breath clouded in the air as the wagon drew nearer. Finally, with a shaky hand and a heart pounding so hard it hurt, she stepped to the side of the road and lifted her arm into the dark. The moment would change everything. Calder. Hayes had been awake for nearly 30 hours. And every minute of it pressed down on him like a weight. His eyes burned from dust and fatigue. His shoulders ached from the rough ride, and even the horses seemed as worn out as he was. But he couldn't stop, not yet. Not when trouble threatened the ranch he'd spent a lifetime trying to protect. The moon hid behind thick clouds, turning the road into a dim, shifting ribbon. Calder's lantern swung from the side of the wagon, throwing long, wavering shadows across the ground. Each time the wagon wheels hit a dip or stone, the jolt rattled up his spine. His vision blurred at the edges, his head drooping for a moment before he forced himself awake again. Sleep tugged at him like a hand on his collar, insistent and dangerous. He muttered to himself, a habit that helped keep his mind sharp enough to steer, sharp enough to sense danger. Rustlers had been spotted near his property 2 nights ago, and a wounded ranch hand had delivered the message just before dawn. They're coming for your herd. Calder had saddled up, ridden to town for supplies, and turned back without resting. Every mile he crossed was 1 mile closer to home. 1 mile closer to what mattered. So when he first saw a figure up ahead, small, still, and half consumed by darkness, his initial reaction was a frustrated groan. The last thing he needed was someone blocking the road. His horses slowed instinctively, sensing the unfamiliar shape. Calder rubbed a hand across his face, trying to blink away the exhaustion that made the silhouette waver. "Don't do this," he muttered to himself. "Not tonight." He debated steering around the figure, pretending he hadn't noticed. It wasn't unheard of on a road like this. People walked alone at night, sometimes drifters, debtors, outlaws, travelers who'd lost their sense of time. Most of the time, they wanted something he couldn't afford to give, food, money, or worse, involvement. But as he neared, the lantern light swung low and illuminated the figure fully. It wasn't a man. It wasn't someone dangerous. It was a young woman, thin, trembling, wrapped in a shawl far too light for the cold. Her face was streaked with dust, her hair tangled by wind, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She raised her arm, hesitant but pleading. Calder felt a tug in his chest he didn't want to feel. He didn't have room for compassion tonight. He didn't have the time, the strength, or the patience. Trouble followed people like her, and he already had plenty of that of his own. He clicked his tongue and gave the reins a small flick, as if to urge the horses onward. But the creatures hesitated. They seemed to sense something in the girl's posture, some quiet misery that even animals understood. The wagon rolled only a few more feet before Calder found himself pulling back on the reins with a defeated sigh. "Damn it," he whispered. The wagon slowed to a stop beside her. Up close, she looked even younger, barely 18, maybe 19. She flinched when he leaned forward, as though expecting harm. Her fear wasn't the kind that came from nerves. It was the deep, instinctive fear of someone who had survived too much already. "What are you doing out here?" Calder asked, his voice gravelly from disuse. She swallowed hard. "Please, I just need to get somewhere safe." Calder clenched his jaw. He didn't want to ask questions. He didn't want to know her story. He especially didn't want to get involved. But something in her voice, something brittle and honest, made it clear that leaving her alone on the road wasn't an option. He was running on empty. But trouble had found him anyway, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he brought the wagon to a full stop. For a long moment, neither Mara nor Calder spoke. The night hung between them, dense and breathless. The lantern swung softly from the wagon, casting shifting shadows across her face, fear etched in every line, exhaustion deepening the hollows beneath her eyes. Calder could see the way her fingers twisted nervously in the frayed edge of her shawl, how she kept one foot angled away as if she might bolt at any second. He didn't blame her. A lone woman on a dark road had every reason to fear a stranger. Still gripping the reins, Calder cleared his throat. "You needing a ride?" he asked, though it was obvious. His voice came out rough, sanded down by fatigue and miles of silence. Mara's gaze flicked to the road behind her before returning to him. I don't want to cause trouble," she said quietly. Calder almost laughed, tired, humorless. "Too late for that," he muttered under his breath. But then he sighed and nodded toward the empty space in the wagon bed. "Get in if you're coming. Road's no place to be alone." Mara hesitated. Every instinct she had begged her not to climb into a wagon with a stranger, especially a man as large and worn-looking as Calder. She could see the exhaustion in his slumped shoulders, the stubborn will in his eyes. He didn't look cruel, but she had learned a long time ago that danger didn't always look the way she expected. Still, the darkness behind her felt like a pair of hands closing slowly around her throat. The thought of walking even another mile made her legs shake. After a moment's silent battle with herself, she nodded. All right, she whispered. Calder shifted aside so she could climb up. She moved cautiously, keeping distance between them, settling near a pile of feed sacks rather than the bench beside him. She tucked her legs close, gaze lowered, as though trying to make herself small enough not to be noticed. Calder didn't push. He simply flicked the reins and urged the horses forward again. The wagon lurched and groaned as it picked up speed. Mara held onto the wooden rail, her knuckles turning white. For several minutes they traveled in silence. Only the creak of the wheels and the soft clop of hooves filled the air. Calder could feel her eyes occasionally dart to him, quick and assessing, before she looked away again. He didn't mind her caution. Caution was what kept people alive out here. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. You running from someone? He asked. Mara stiffened. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wanted to lie, but the truth was too heavy to hold alone. Yes, she whispered. But I don't want you involved. Calder scoffed. Too late for that, too. She winced. If you want me to get out, I didn't say that. His voice, though tired, held a firm note that stopped her apology short. Just don't lie. I don't need your whole story. Just need to know if anyone's going to come ridden up behind us. Her stomach twisted. She looked down at her hands. I don't know, she admitted. But it's possible. That was the answer he least wanted. He rubbed his face, squeezing his eyes shut for a moment as fatigue gnawed at him. Trouble. Always more trouble. But he looked at her again. This young woman who was clearly terrified. Alone and trying so hard not to be a burden. Whatever danger trailed her, she didn't deserve to face it alone. He straightened his back and took a deeper breath, forcing his weary body awake. All right, he said quietly. If someone's after you, I'll hear him before I see him. You just keep your head down. Mara felt something warm push against the despair crowding her chest, something like fragile hope. She watched him from the corner of her eye, tired, worn, but unexpectedly steadfast. She hadn't known him for even half an hour. Yet something told her that this stranger, was already risking more for her than anyone ever had, and neither of them knew that. Far behind them, in the dark, two riders had begun to follow their trail. The night seemed to grow thicker the farther the wagon traveled. The air felt heavy, weighted with something Mara couldn't name but could feel in her bones. She kept glancing back over her shoulder, her breath catching every time the shadow shifted or a branch snapped under the wind. Calder noticed. He noticed everything, and though he said nothing at first, the tightening line of his jaw made it clear her unease wasn't lost on him. Finally, as the wagon creaked across a shallow dip in the road, Calder spoke. You keep looking back there like you expect the devil himself to come ridden out of the dark. Mara flinched at his bluntness. I just have a bad feeling. Calder gave her a sharp, sideways look. Bad feeling or bad reason? She froze, fingers curling around the wooden rail of the wagon. After a long moment, she exhaled shakily and turned her gaze forward, her voice barely more than a breath. Both. He didn't interrupt. Exhausted as he was, he felt a prickle down his spine. Start talking. And keep it short. Mara nodded, swallowing hard. My stepfather owed money to men who don't forgive debts. They came looking for him today, and for anyone who might talk. I don't know if they're following me. I feel like they might be. Calder bit back a curse. You knew this and still flagged me down? I didn't have a choice, she whispered, guilt flooding her face. "I was scared. I'm sorry. If you want me to get off, I will." He stared at her for a long second. She expected anger. Instead, he huffed a rough sigh. "Ain't throwing you to wolves, girl. Just wish trouble would quit finding me." Something in his tone, not gentle, but undeniably protective, eased the tension in her shoulders. For a while, they rode in silence again, the horses' hooves thudding rhythmically against the dirt road. But the quiet didn't last. Calder's ears, sharper than most from years of ranch work, picked up something faint in the distance, a sound that didn't belong to the night. He lifted his head slightly, narrowing his eyes as he listened. Hoofbeats, more than one. Far off but steady. Mara sensed the shift in him instantly. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He tugged lightly on the reins, slowing the wagon just enough to let the horses breathe without stopping entirely. His eyes scanned the horizon, the back trail, and the brush on both sides of the road. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement, a glint of metal catching the moon's faint light. Two riders, just silhouettes at this distance, but unmistakably following their path with purpose. They weren't wandering. They weren't passing by. They were tracking. Calder's jaw tightened until the muscles strained. "You weren't wrong," he muttered. "We got company." Mara's breath hitched, panic flashing across her face. She twisted to look behind them, but Calder grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. "Don't make it obvious," he said in a low voice. "Eyes forward." She obeyed, though her heart hammered like a trapped bird. Is it them?" she asked, barely able to force the words out. "Looks like," Calder said. His tone remained calm, but Mara could hear the steel beneath it. She had brought danger with her, heavy, violent danger, and this man, who'd already been running himself ragged, was now caught up in it. The wagon creaked onward. The riders kept their distance but did not disappear. They moved when Calder moved, slowed when he slowed, as though tethered to the wagon by some invisible rope. Mara swallowed her rising fear. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring this to you." Calder didn't look at her, but his grip tightened on the reins. "What's done is done," he said. "Now we deal with it." For the first time that night, Mara believed he was capable of facing whatever came, even if he was running on empty. And somewhere deep within her chest, a fragile, defiant hope flickered to life. The presence of the riders behind them changed everything. Calder felt the shift in the air as sharply as he felt the reins between his fingers. Danger had a way of waking a man, even when running on the last threads of strength. His exhaustion evaporated beneath a surge of adrenaline, sharpening his senses until the night came into crisp focus. For several tense minutes, neither he nor Mara spoke. The wagon creaked forward, the horses snorting nervously as if they too sensed the threat behind them. Mara sat stiff as a board, hands clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles looked bloodless. Calder kept his gaze fixed on the dark trail ahead, though he flicked quick glances to the side, studying escape routes, terrain, and shadows like a man reading a map only he understood. Finally, he made his choice, without warning. Calder yanked the reins hard to the right. The wagon lurched violently. Mara nearly toppled from her seat, catching herself on the rail. What are you doing?" Calder didn't answer immediately. He guided the horses off the main road, steering them toward a narrow cut in the terrain, an old, almost invisible cattle path he knew only because he'd driven it countless times in his youth. It was steep, rocky, and dangerous even in daylight. At night, it was nearly suicidal, but it would hide them. "We ain't leading them straight," he finally said, voice low, controlled. "Not down the open road. They want you. They'll have to work for it." Mara's breath caught. Her throat tightened painfully. "You're..." You're helping me? Even now? Calder snorted. Seems like it. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever risked anything for her, certainly not a stranger who was at the edge of collapse. She didn't know whether to thank him or beg him to turn back. But it's too dangerous, she whispered. You could get hurt. Or worse. Calder gave a humorless huff of a laugh. I'll take dangerous over dead any day. And if those men catch up on the road, dead's exactly what we'll be. The crude but honest logic silenced her. Behind them, the riders quickened their pace, realizing the wagon had left the trail. Calder urged the horses faster. Though the terrain grew rougher, the wheels bounced over rocks, splashed through a shallow ravine, and groaned under the strain of the uneven ground. Mara clung to the side, heart racing. Hold on, Calder warned. It's gonna get messy. The riders shouted something too distant to hear clearly, but angry, urgent. Mara's stomach turned to ice. They were close. Too close. Calder's body moved with the rhythm of the wagon, steady despite his exhaustion. Every instinct in him screamed that he couldn't outrun armed men forever, not with a wagon, not in the dark. There was only one way to give Mara a chance. He had to stop running, and he had to draw the danger away from her dot at the base of a rocky ridge. Calder suddenly pulled the reins, bringing the horses to a sharp halt. Mara pitched forward in confusion. Why are we stopping? Calder didn't answer with words at first. He reached behind the bench and pulled out his rifle, a long, weathered weapon with a scarred stock and a history as rough as its owner. Mara's eyes widened. No, Calder, no, you can't. He cut her off with a steady, surprisingly gentle look. They won't stop, Mara. Not while you're here. Her breath trembled. Then I'll run. You won't get far enough, he said firmly. And I ain't losing sleep knowing I left you to die. Those words struck her harder than any threat behind them dot in one swift motion. Calder jumped down from the wagon, boots hitting the earth with a thud. He checked the rifle, cocked it, and looked her dead in the eyes. Get down low. Stay hidden. Don't move till I come back. But no arguing, he said. I'm ending this. Then he did the unthinkable. He turned away from the wagon and walked straight toward the riders, toward danger rifle in hand. Willing to face them alone so she could live, Dot and Mara, trembling, realized this exhausted. Stubborn Rancher was the bravest man she had ever met. Morning arrives gently over the Harding Ranch, casting soft beams of gold across the fields, a sharp contrast to the violence, fear, and tension that had consumed the ranch the night before. But this dawn is different. It isn't just the start of a new day. It's the beginning of something deeper, a fragile, growing trust between the wounded cowboy and the frightened siblings he has now sworn to protect. Inside the ranch house, the atmosphere has shifted. Where silence once lived, thick, guarded, and trembling, there is now a quiet warmth. The girl, who had spent days believing no adult could ever be fully trusted, wakes to the smell of breakfast drifting from the kitchen. The cowboy isn't accustomed to cooking for anyone but himself, yet he moves with surprising gentleness, making sure the children feel safe enough to start their morning without fear. For the first time in years, she doesn't wake up wondering if someone is coming for them. Because someone already came, and instead of hurting them, he stood between them and danger. Her brother, still shaken from the shootout, clings to the cowboy's promise as if it were a lifeline. If they come, I'll protect her. And the cowboy had not hesitated. He had drawn his gun and fought, as if the children were his own. Dot as they gather at the small wooden table, the boy watches the cowboy the way a stray dog watches an open hand, suspicious, hopeful, unsure. But the cowboy doesn't push. He pours coffee for himself and sets warm bread and eggs in front of the children, letting them eat before speaking. His silence is not harsh. It's comfortable. He respects their space, their wounds, their unspoken fears, the girl studies him carefully. Last night, she saw a side of him few ever did: fierce, protective, unflinching in the face of danger. But this morning, he is calm, almost gentle, as though the storm inside him has settled. She begins to sense that the toughness he shows the world is only one part of him. Beneath it lies a man who knows loss, who understands fear, who carries his own ghosts. And somehow, that makes her trust him more. After breakfast, the cowboy takes them outside to help with the morning chores, not because he needs the help, but because he wants them to feel a sense of belonging. He lets the boy feed the horses, guiding his hands with steady patience. The child, who had been too terrified to even speak the day before, now asks small questions. The cowboy answers each one, slowly, simply, kindly. Meanwhile, the girl stands at the fence, watching them with a mix of disbelief and relief. It has been so long since she has seen her brother smile, even a little. She realizes that the cowboy did more than save them. He gave her brother a moment of childhood back. Later, as the sun climbs higher, the cowboy teaches the girl how to check the perimeter of the ranch. He shows her how to track footprints, how to spot broken brush, how to hold herself with confidence rather than fear. He doesn't treat her as fragile. He treats her as capable. And that, more than anything, begins to mend the cracks inside her. As they walk the fence line, she gathers the courage to ask the question that has been burning inside her. Why did you help us? The cowboy pauses. His answer is simple, honest, and carries the weight of a man who has seen too much loss. Because someone should have helped me once, and didn't. In that moment, trust is no longer a possibility, it becomes a foundation. By the time the sun reaches its peak, the ranch feels different, safer, warmer, more alive. They are no longer three strangers tied together by danger. They are the beginnings of a new, fragile family built on courage, protection, and the promise of something better. It is a dawn not just of a new day, but of new trust, new hope, and a new life waiting to be built.